I'm Jim Irwin, as you probably all know, Chair of the Rocky Mountain Biosphere Reserve. I'll be hosting tonight's workshop, and Dennis Hodges will be assisting with the Q&A. To begin, I would like to acknowledge that the Rocky Mountain Biosphere Reserve is in Treaty 2 and 4 territories of the Anishinaabe people, and say that we respect and share their all-important teachings that water is a sacred gift essential for all life. The Rocky Mountain Biosphere Reserve has been in existence since 1986, and we've been bringing people together to share their knowledge for the well-being of our communities. In this respect, we are pleased to have the participants in our Manitoba Healthy Prairie Lakes Network share their stories as we continue on the topic tonight of protecting our lakes from aquatic invasive species, particularly zebra mussels. Our first presentation tonight is entitled Citizens Protecting Our Northern Waterways. We are very honored to have Christopher Smith tell us the stories of the Citizens for Protecting Our Northern Waterways organization, an organization formed to prevent the spread of zebra mussels into northern lakes. Chris is a certified wildlife biologist who lives in Cranberry Portage. He was instrumental in forming the organization and is the current president. We look forward to hearing about your organization and more about the incredible work you're doing, Chris.
All right, thank you everyone for attending tonight, and most of all, thank you for the invitation to participate in this workshop series. Once again, thank you for the opportunity. It's really exciting to be part of included in a larger discussion around this very important issue around aquatic invasive species, and with the focus particularly on zebra mussels, which for our group is sort of, if you want to call it, the poster child, if you will. But we believe that if you have measures to protect the invasion of zebra mussels, you'll protect our waters from the other aquatic invasive species that are in the province and perhaps others that are coming behind. Just a little bit about our group. We are a coalition of citizens and business volunteers committed to protecting our pristine northern waters. And our focus, as I've said, is preventing the spread of invasive zebra mussels. We are about awareness, outreach, and more recently advocacy. We're about liaison with government, who's leading the Aquatic Invasive Species Program. And we also provide resource materials for those that are interested in learning. Just a little brief 3-slide set here, just to remind us why we are interested in this work and concerned. We look at it in sort of 3 pillars, if you will. The first is the concern on the ecological impacts of zebra mussels. The first thing is that we know that they increase water clarity, which results in increased vegetation growth and has the potential to have an increase in toxic algae blooms, such as what's being experienced in Lake Winnipeg. Results in decrease of certain game species. It's been documented that in some locations, walleye and whitefish can be impacted negatively, as well as native clam species. At the end of the day, it alters the aquatic food web, and the ecological integrity of lakes and waterways are compromised. The second concern relates more socially. These are scenes from Lake Winnipeg. Sharp shells litter the beaches. They impact our beach experience. There's increased drag on boats, and there's fouling of people's watercrafts, and it reduces or changes the sport fishing experience. The third concern relates to economic. With the zebra mussels, they impede and block water flow. Municipal and home water supplies are compromised, as are hydro facilities, such as the picture in the lower right-hand corner, golf courses, where they have water intake from waterways, fire suppression, etc., resulting in increased costs in municipalities, resulting in increased taxes to homeowners. And there's certainly implications to tourism dollars as a result of the invasion of this invasive species. Just to switch gears now to sort of the area of interest of our group, Citizens for Protecting Our Northern Waterways. Initially, our focus were on lakes and waterways in west central Manitoba, north of the Pas. Our group got started in Cranberry Portage, and our focus was really around the Pas, Rocky Lake, Flin Flon, Cranberry Portage areas. But as we learned more and we saw the increased expansion of zebra mussels into the Nelson River slopes above the Saskatchewan River, Grass River, Nelson River, and Churchill River watersheds. And this is just a schematic that I clipped off of the internet, off the provincial government's website. Something that's we're reminded of here, and many of you would be aware, of course, is that many of these areas have long-standing history of angling visitors from the United States, from places that have zebra mussels already invaded in their waterways, as well as visitors from Lake Winnipeg who do their angling there, which increases the risk of distribution of zebra mussels into our waterways. And something that perhaps is different than the lakes in the south and the prairie regions where you folks have been focusing your discussions is that our land here is publicly owned, it's Crown land. There's thousands, literally thousands of lakes, many of which are interconnected to one another. And just to give you a bit of an idea for those that aren't aware, I put this together as sort of how the water flows. The red lines are the waters that flow into the Nelson River system from the Saskatchewan. The black line is the Grass River that flows into the Nelson. The brown line to the upper left are the waterways that end up in the Churchill River system. All of these waterways are easily accessible by roads. So the introduction of zebra mussels into any one of these waterways that are not already impacted are at high risk. And I threw this line, you'll see a line up here on the screen. And in terms of thinking about strategies or approaches to prevent the spread, waterways and lakes to the left of this orange line flow into infected waters. To the right, these are waterways that are receiving water from infected waters. So as we go forward, we need to be thinking about strategies and approaches that address these important differences. And for us, most of our focus is on the left-hand side of this line to prevent the spread of zebra mussels and other invasive species into these waterways. The progression of our group, I'm going to put them into sort of different categories, and I'll call the first stage being the awakening stage, which was in 2015, 2016. Myself personally working in the field of conservation, I was very aware of the invasion of zebra mussels into the south basin of Lake Winnipeg in 2013. But lo and behold, 2 years later, we've got adult zebra mussels showing up in Lake Winnipeg, the North Basin, and veligers, which are the juveniles of zebra mussels, were found in Cedar Lake, upstream of the power dam at Grand Rapids. This was sort of alarming how quickly this came about to me personally, and I think to many others in the area. Moving to 2016, that's when we kind of started to commence our awareness. I took it on personally as a personal initiative, and reached out with my concerns over to our local LUD in a letter to our local government, requesting them to raise awareness to other governments. We I had initial contact with government to start to understand more about the issue. Letters to articles to newspapers that got printed, and we have local newsletters locally that just to try to get the word out, hey folks, we've got an issue coming. And at that time, there was no inspection station in the north. I call it 2017 simmering for somewhat personal reasons. I was finishing my career very busy and really had no personal action, and others up here had no direct action either. So there were no local initiatives and decontamination stations north of the Paw, as well as at Grand Rapids. And these were single shift, 5-day-a-week station stops that were not even, I don't believe they were manned more than 8 hours a day. And something of interest to me, as I think back, is that these stations were new to people. They had very little understanding of the issue. They didn't even understand what they were really there for. Many people were driving by. So clearly there was an awareness shortage, at least up here. If we take us now to 2018, I'll call this period sort of the ramping up of awareness for our group locally. There was a small group that started to form, get concerned. A real eye-opener to many of us, I think, was at a tourism planning meeting in our local community. I think as a result of some of our outreach earlier, aquatic invasive species were identified as a real concern and considered a high risk to tourism potential in northern Manitoba around Cranberry Portage, and was considered the #1 threat to our community next to poaching. So we had the beginning of a skeleton group. We handed out material that was prepared. We prepared some basic material, got it distributed to what we could locally, particularly the lodges that we hoped would share with their clients coming north. And we came to realize and understood that there was limited signage at the boat launches, so we assisted in putting up signs at launches at that time. Moving to 2019, call this full engagement. One of the things at the end of 2018 that became apparent was that we needed to establish a stronger relationship with the Manitoba government. Held some meetings and started to build a relationship. We hosted zebra mussel seminars that were focused at the rural municipality level, at our local LUD, as well as community meetings to get people aware. And as a result of those meetings, we organized some coffee meetings and some local meetings, and we started to get a regional group formed, mostly from the Paw, Cranberry Portage, Clearwater Lake, Rocky Lake areas, if you're familiar with this area. And as we got a little bit more legitimate, if you will, we put out a local campaign, and we've established a name called Citizens for Protecting Northern Waterways. We were successful in getting newspaper articles, we were preparing newsletters, and we started our rudimentary outreach initiatives, meeting with, for example, Clearwater Lake cottagers and at Baker's Narrows. And we also hosted the government-led watercraft inspection training to get people more interested, more involved in understanding the issue. One of the things that I think was really important during this time in 2019 was, as people became more aware, they started to identify some key gaps in the approach that was being taken by government. Not that it was necessarily wrong, not at all. It's just that there were gaps. And to us, we saw that as being an important contribution that we could make as a group to government. And that's why it was, in my view, very important that we had a strong relationship with the government staff. And it was during this time, and it was partly a result of the views and positions of the people that were attending our meetings and our local group, that to press government at a different level, at an advocacy level. I was successful in getting a letter to the editor that responded to another letter or article written about perhaps different approaches that could be taken for addressing this issue. It was at this time I got to know Daryl Kynes, who's also on this call, as well as Jim Irwin, and we put together pre-election letters to candidates and incumbent MLAs, asking them for action, increased action. And we also were given the opportunity, and I met with the Northern Tourism Advisory Committee for Travel Manitoba. And we have members of our committee on our local tourism committee that were observing, we've got tons of money going to tourism in this province, and we're underfunding our zebra mussel prevention program. And the two are not even connected. They have different mandates. And you were hard pressed to find any information on aquatic invasive species in the Travel Manitoba website or any of their associated literature. So we've reached out and advocated for them to be more mindful and work together on addressing this issue. So that was a busy year, and I think everybody felt pretty good. And then came 2020, and it was a very difficult year for all of us, but I call this period expanded outreach and legitimacy. We were becoming more recognized. We were encouraged, and we applied for and received a grant from Manitoba Fish and Wildlife Enhancement Fund, which was awesome. We figured that in order to become more legitimate, we put forward a little bit of an initiative locally with a local artist, and we had some selection of our logo, which is you can see in the lower right-hand corner. We received funding from our local LUD, as well as the watershed district that gave us some seed money and put together a website, and we own our own domain, zebramusselprevention.com. And given COVID, we saw this as a way to communicate to the local public about what we were doing, and it started a place to house information that could be helpful to people. We had more watercraft inspection training. The COVID lightened up in the summer, and we were able to host 2 sessions here in Cranberry Portage, which was really well received. On the advocacy side, there was a couple of us that met with the Town Council of the PAW as well as Flin Flon, and were successful in getting a resolution to the Association of Manitoba Municipalities for enhanced support for zebra mussel prevention. And that was supported and passed at the AMM convention this last November as a provincial level resolution. But as we were moving forward, it became obvious that we needed to become more formal. We had advice from one of our members, who's a retired lawyer, who said that we needed to start becoming more organized. And we held our first AGM in the fall. We have a formal executive and advisors as regional representatives, some of which are with us this evening. And we've just filed for incorporation. We have our first set of bylaws that will function as our constitution and enhance the legitimacy of our organization. So I'll conclude with what I'll call the take-home from our experience. This is a big issue, and it's a huge challenge, let alone it's somewhere outside of Manitoba. We got over 100,000 lakes in this province, and government cannot do it on its own. It's not possible. And the role of citizen groups like ours is critical. We can do things that they can't. But we see our role is to assist and augment what government does, not to replace it, but to enhance it. Positive relationship with government is important. We may not always be happy with the way government is undertaking this particular initiative, but it's critical. It's their job. So having a relationship with them is critical in our mind. The third piece, from my perspective, credibility and legitimacy is necessary to be heard and respected. We've been very careful with the material we provided, many times passed by the government officials to ensure we're not misleading the public, trying to be professional and representing our communities as good citizens so that we're respected. The fourth, we think advocacy is necessary to get government to act. Working within government is challenging. They've got limited budgets and it's shrinking. And everybody has a boss. So we believe it's really important to get at the political level. The program is underfunded, it's understaffed, and they know it. And they need help. In the end, strength in numbers outweighs one-offs. There is no way that I could have done this locally on my own. It's the help of our community and our group on our volunteers that's making our group stronger. And I think if you look provincially, I think, you know, the more that we can work together to address this important issue, the better off we'll be. And that's it. Thank you, folks. And I encourage you to visit our website and provide us feedback. We'd be much welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. We do have some questions for you. What is the best advice that you can give to lake communities that are attempting to organize to deal with the AIS issue?
Understand the problem, learn what you can, make good contact with government folks, and get the best information you can out to your local community to enhance the awareness. That's number one. I think back, you know, when people were questioning about the watercraft inspection stations, you know, they didn't really understand, they didn't know, and that's a real fallback, I think, of the government initiative is awareness. So making those contacts with government, understanding the problem, getting a good understanding how it might affect your waterway or your lake, and getting information out so people can act appropriately.
And you must have some rather unique challenges there, or have had some unique challenges given the size of the area and the region that you're dealing with. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I'd say it's unique in that there's so much water up here, and many of the lakes are interconnected, and sometimes not always that interconnectedness isn't always understood. For example, we have a lake that's outside of a control zone that should be included in the control zone, and it was just due to lack of understanding of how the water flows, if you will. So, and here lies another reason why our group can be, or a local group can be beneficial, is that they oftentimes know some of the intricacies of how the water moves. The second thing is we had a really when the watercraft inspection stations were starting up, the first gap that people identified was, first of all, they're not open 24 hours. Secondly, they're not open 7 days a week. And we got lodge owners on our committee, and they said a lot of our hunters, or fishermen rather, come up at night because they leave from Minnesota or North Dakota or Wisconsin. They drive all night so that they can get on the water first thing in the morning. So they're driving through when these things aren't even open. We were actually pretty successful, I think, in getting some of the time frames of the stations being opened to try to be more aligned with when people are moving through the area. And that was particularly helpful when, and I don't know if we had a huge role to play, but when they went to double shifting here, so they got two 8-hour shifts, that really helped. And they were willing to accommodate based on our knowledge of our lodges, you know, when they open up and when they close. So that was really helpful. So there's a couple examples there.
Sounds like the lodges were very much supportive of any mitigation activity against AIS. Can you speak a bit to that one? Yes,
I can. That's their bread and butter. Fishing up here is their bread and butter. And if you get to the Paw, hunting is very much a big deal there. And these guys are, believe it or not, they're going from waters that are infected to other waters. For duck hunting, for example, they'll go hunting in waters that are potentially impacted, to lake trout fishing in Clearwater Lake that evening. They have the high potential of transferring zebra mussels into Clearwater Lake through that method. There has not been a lodge that has not expressed concern. They're really concerned of the impact that the invasion of zebra mussels into the waters that they're putting their clients on is going to be impacted negatively. Interesting, there was a discussion about, well, holy cow, if you tell them about zebra mussels, maybe people won't want to come here. There was that discussion at one of the meetings. And one of the local lodge owners here in Cranberry said, no, what we need to say is, we're proud that we're zebra mussel free. Help us keep it that way. And so it was very positive. So they've been all, most of them have been real active. There's a few that are silent. There's some that are really agitated when you talk about it because they're very, very concerned. But in all, they've been very supportive of the efforts and would like to see more.
Another question that says, Chris, knowing that a lake like Schist Lake near Flin Flon has water flow into Lake Winnipeg, is there any fear that zebra mussels could migrate north from Lake Winnipeg up to lakes like Schist Lake?
Good question. The evidence is that the transfer upstream can only occur in things like boats, jet skis, kayaks, that type of thing, equipment. The natural distribution, if you will, naturally is through the free-flowing juvenile phase of the development of zebra mussels. So they go with the flow, if you will. That's why it was predicted and not unexpected that once Lake Winnipeg got invaded, that they would be in the Nelson River system. And it was from 2013, it was 2019 that they made it into the Nelson, all the way to Kelsey, 2/3 of the way to the Hudson Bay, if not farther. So that's just through free flowing. So good question about schist, but the likelihood of them going naturally is non-existent, really. It's going to be through the movement of people's water equipment. The real concern, though, is if it does get into Schist Lake, it's free flowing all the way down to Lake Athabasca, Goose Lake, all the way into the Saskatchewan River down to the Paw. If one got into first Cranberry Lake, every lake between here and the Nelson River would be likely invaded over time because they flow downstream. It's the real that's the real worry, is introducing these guys upstream.
Has your group looked at the commercial fishermen movement up and down the Saskatchewan River to Grand Rapids, Chris?
We're aware of it. There's really been no outreach. The only conversation that I've had has been with the minnow fishermen who fish along the Saskatchewan River. The big risk, as you might know, is if you have a commercial fishing operation that's in Cedar Lake, which is invaded, them transporting fish or zebra mussels or their larvae upstream, say to the Paw, then between the Paw and Cedar Lake would be affected. Or if they are commercial fishing in another water body, so they're transporting their equipment that's been infected from, say, Cedar Lake. The example I gave of the minnow fishermen is that it's just too big of a problem. It's too much work for them to be moving a lot of their minnow traps, so they have them lake specific, so that they're not moving their minnow traps from one watershed to another, which is a good thing. That's by choice, not by design. But outside of that, no.
You were speaking about the importance of the role of citizens in your group and on the project. And what specifically do you see and have citizens been doing, and what do you see them doing in the future relative to that role?
Well, initially, what it was spreading awareness. Secondly, was assisting government with an inventory of what boat launches did not have signage, so that they could be properly signed. Third item was distribution of material to the local communities, for example, to the marine outfitters, to the gas stations, ensuring the lodges had that material. And the next steps that we were looking at about got shut down by COVID was starting to, be represented at trade shows, that type of thing. So that's sort of what's happened so far. But I think our plans going forward will be more, and of course hosting and participating and assisting with those watercraft inspection training courses, loaning their boats, that type of thing, and putting up signs.
When you look ahead, what are some of the greatest challenges that you see coming down the chute?
We're fortunate in that we've got two major highways coming from the south. So the provincial government wisely selected Grand Rapids and the Pas, north of the Pas, as being two places to inspect and, if need, decontaminate. But now that we've got them in the Nelson system, now we have the potential for boats or zero miles to be transferred east to west. The province, to our knowledge, has no plans because of budget to put in inspection stations at two main road crossings, one south of Woboden with the highway going to Cross Lake from Highway 6. Those boats freely travel from Cross Lake area to relatives, etc., in, say, Setting Lake, Woboden, that type of thing. And then the other is there's a highway that goes to Gillam, north of Thompson, and that's another place that you need to be inspecting boats coming west. And so I'm not suggesting the government does not want to do that, but having the capacity to do that. So the big challenge is the political will to put forward the money to support those programs. We need those. Unlike what Daryl's group has at Sandy Lake, where you've got potential a local control of boats being put in the water where you can inspect them. Here, that would be impossible to do. So you need to have these major stopping points and dedicated staff to inspect and decontaminate if necessary. So capacity, funding, commitment from the provincial government.
So that's huge. We have one last question here, Chris, and then you may have a parting shot that you might like to make.
Okay.
It's can villagers move with live bait?
Yes.
I'd like to thank all of you for the questions you submitted, and you've helped to make this workshop a very interesting one.
Thank you. And just as a closing comment, this is at a personal level. I was in conservation my entire working career. Working for Ducks Unlimited, I worked in forest conservation as well. But now that I'm retired, I'm really looking at this as probably being the most challenging conservation issue that I've worked on in my career. And it's that important to me to see this addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris, for an excellent presentation and the great work you're doing to protect your northern lakes there. Moving on, we are pleased to have Daryl Kynes once again to wrap up our series on protecting our lakes from aquatic invasive species. Daryl's presentation tonight is entitled, How Do We Improve Our AIS Protection Measures in Manitoba? As you know from our last workshops, Daryl lives in Sandy Lake and has been involved in the Biosphere's AIS awareness campaign and has taken a leading role in the protection of Sandy Lake's waters. And he heads up the Sandy Lake Water Protection Working Group, which is focused both on nutrient loading problems and AIS threats. Today, Daryl will delve into the details of the current status and gaps of the Manitoba AIS prevention program as we consider steps we can take to better protect our lakes. Daryl?
Thank you, Jim. We're going to talk about how we might be able to improve our protective measures in Manitoba. There are 4 topics that can help reduce the likelihood of your waters being invaded by an aquatic invasive species. The first thing you must do is to build public awareness. It's vital, and we've covered that in the Lake Stewardship Workshop number 2. The second and third topics were covered in the third workshop. This presentation will cover the fourth topic, next steps. In order to determine the next steps, we need to review, number 1, the protective measures the province of Manitoba has in place now, and the existing gaps that need to be addressed. Then we can talk about suggested roles for groups such as the province, the municipalities, the local groups, volunteer groups. In the conclusion, I'm going to pose a question about the best strategy moving forward. We don't have all the answers. I want to tell you about the event that moved me to action. It was a presentation regarding aquatic invasive species held at Sandy Lake in 2017. And I learned that the province did not have the lake where I live well protected. At another presentation held in Sandy Lake in 2018, I asked the question, what would happen if Sandy Lake became invaded with zebra mussels? Well, the answer was either 1, the lake could be closed, and if any watercraft was spotted on the lake, we should call the RCMP. The second option was only cottage owners would be able to continue to use their watercraft on the lake, but we would not be able to use it on any other water body. And if a watercraft that did not belong on the lake was spotted, we would call the RCMP. The second option was what happened at Shingoose Lake. Shingoose Lake is located in the Duck Mountain Provincial Park. In May of 2017, the lake was closed to dayboat users after a suspect adult zebra mussel was found. Only cottage owners were allowed to continue using their watercraft on the lake, and that was on the condition that they would not move their watercraft to use it on any other water body. It doesn't take a genius to realize that if this were to happen at Sandy Lake, it would be a disaster for the local economy and everything else here. Another thing you should be aware of is that the staff running the provincial AIS program is about 3.5 full-time equivalent people, and their budget has been reduced in each of the last 4 years. Based on my knowledge of Manitoba's current program to protect our uninvaded waters from AIS, I firmly believe the province can't provide the increased protection from AIS that we need without our help. Well, let's start with Manitoba's current AIS program. The director, the AIS director, Jeff Long, gave a presentation in 2018 at Riding Mountain Biosphere Reserve event in Roblin, and he described the program as having 5 pillars, as you see on the screen. The first one is legislation. They've got, well, it's referred to as W65, the Water Protection Act, and they have a regulation. This may be the best AIS legislation any province in Canada has passed. Set fines allow enforcement officers to issue tickets using the short form offense descriptions and preset fine amounts. This pillar is very well done, and we need not go further into it. The next one is prevention, and it includes public awareness, watercraft inspections and decontaminations, and working with partners. This pillar has a number of gaps, which we'll discuss further. The next one is monitoring. The province continuously monitors the status of AIS in Manitoba. Like COVID-19 testing, I believe more water bodies should be monitored, but they are doing a good job at this point. Number 4 is early detection and rapid response. This pillar seems to be working as evidenced by Shingoose and Whirlpool lakes, and we need not go further into this one. Control and management refers to adapting to established and spreading AIS populations in Manitoba, which is the case in control zone. Well, we want to avoid these nasty repercussions, and we won't discuss that one further. Basically, the prevention pillar is trying to prevent or slow the movement of AIS from invaded waters in Manitoba to other uninvaded water bodies. And it's also trying to prevent the introduction of AIS from outside of the province into Manitoba. The Stop AIS website has undergone a much needed improvement and continues to be improved. These are things that they've been working on for a while, but they've made a very large step forward on this one. Public awareness presentations are not given frequently enough. I think only one staff member does them. That would be Candace Parks. That needs to be expanded. Public awareness advertising is not done on TV, radio, or social media. They have no budget for it. Large AIS highway signs are not posted on major roadways because, again, there's no budget for it. We need more coordination between government departments and crown corporations to inform the public about AIS. In fact, the department did have a budget for a sign to be located at the Emerson border crossing on Highway 75, but the Highways Department wouldn't allow them to put it in the location they selected. That was sort of dropped. We have 6 watercraft inspection stations in the province, and they've been located in the same spots for the past 3 years, I believe. There's one in Paw, there's one at Grand Rapids, there's another one at Swan River, and one on Highway 6. Well, it was at Ericsdale, but it's now, I believe, just a little north of there. So they catch people that are taking a shortcut to the Narrows. And then they have one at Headingley and one at Selkirk, and that's it. They don't operate 7x24, and they don't cover all of the main highways. We at Sandy Lake will get boats that come through on Highway 2, as an example. Working with partners, well, the municipalities and the province don't always see eye to eye, and the Canadian Border Services, they aren't doing as good a job as they need to. Law enforcement aren't enforcing the law as we hoped they would. So here we get into suggested roles for each of the main players. The province should just continue with their existing protection plan. It just needs to be improved because of the gaps that, well, they've been identified by more than myself. Municipalities need to support local groups, and they can do that by hosting public awareness presentations and helping with inspector training and certificate courses, providing a location, for example. Encourage local groups to be involved in AIS public awareness campaigns, pay for the printing of AIS awareness material, pay for and install signs at boat launches within their municipality, encourage local groups to undertake AIS watercraft inspections, close public launch areas to a lake where it is reasonable to redirect the watercraft to a single launch point where they can be inspected. Allow watercraft inspection buildings to be located at municipal boat launches. And number 2 there, encourage the RCMP serving their municipality to enforce the AIS laws that are in their brown book. And they should partner with nearby municipalities, local groups, and the province to create a watercraft decontamination station. If there is not one a provincial decontamination station within a reasonable driving distance, I think that's about 30 minutes. And they should have at least two of their municipal employees trained on watercraft decontamination. In our area, we inspect a lot of boats, but a very small number of them need to be decontaminated. So this is a practical thing as well. And for sure, they should be advocating for more support for the provincial program. They should bring their concerns up at AMM meetings and talk with MLAs and their peers. Volunteer groups, hopefully they will conduct public awareness campaigns. That is something the municipality can't do as good a job as they can. They should inspect watercraft at their local boat launch if, once they've had a little bit of training, and if that makes sense for their particular situation. And for sure, they should advocate for more support for the provincial program. The conclusion, very basic, we must make our concerns a priority for the Manitoba government. If we don't do that, they will continue to ignore us. And really the question is, what's the best strategy?
We do have some questions, Daryl. What might be some of the specific impacts that could happen in a community like the Sandy Lake community if the lake dreadfully were ever quarantined because of zebra mussels?
Well, the first thing that would happen is we would have less camping activity. The cottagers would continue to come, but the camping facilities we have here, I think there's 4 campgrounds, and there's a lot of activity there, and most people are camping here because they like the fishing or they like the water sports on the lake. So that population would decrease, and it would reduce the stores. They would, well, we have a really good co-op here for shopping for food, and I believe that store would start to deteriorate as far as the selection and so on of things. So businesses would suffer. I think the next thing that would happen is as the invasion progressed, it wouldn't be all that much fun to walk on the beach, or fishing would probably reduce because the food chain would be interrupted, and we'd also have a lot more submersive vegetation. The whole lake would change quite a bit. It would probably end up with reduced values of our cottages, and if it got to the point where we ended up having these things on our beaches, I would say more people would stop coming here and they would just sell their cottage for a loss. The golf course would also suffer because they irrigate with lake water, and they would have additional maintenance on their pumps, and the municipality would also have issues that are like that. They probably would have their infrastructure for water and sewer invaded, and it just would spiral down. It would not be good.
That's a broad scale of impact for sure. How far away is the nearest RCMP detachment, and how many members can Sandy Lake community rely upon?
We see them cruising down the highway a fair bit. I believe there's a detachment in Elphinstone, which is about 10 minutes away. I'm not sure how many people are in that detachment, but I believe there's also another detachment that is at, Clear Lake. And I'm not sure if they end up patrolling our highways. But if we're lucky, they could probably get on site if there was an emergency in 10 minutes.
In the regular line of business, what might be some of your druthers in terms of actions that law enforcement might consider?
Well, some of the things that are pretty obvious that they can do relate to, say, going down the highway and having your drain plugs installed in a boat. That's something that they can give a ticket for if they want to. Well, if they catch someone, then they could do that. In some ways, it's to like I'd like to see them enforce the laws a little more vigorously. Right now, well, last year, they really didn't know that much about what was in the Brown Book on aquatic invasive species. Actually, that was 2019. We did have an incident where a number of teenagers decided they were going to start drinking, and they went out onto the swimming platform and released it from its moorings, and then they were pulling it around, and well, they were pretty well cut. And our watercraft inspector called the police. They arrived in about 10 minutes, and they got these characters all organized and got them home safely. In the meantime, because the watercraft inspector, because she phoned the police, they had to get a statement from her. So when they came by, I handed them our forms that basically show the fines that are available for them to issue. And they asked me if they could keep it. I said, of course. They didn't really know anything about it, but it was maybe 3 months. 3 months prior to that, they got a new Brown Book, which is a list of all the fines they can issue that are easy to issue, basically, and you don't have to go to court. So the reason I think that fines should be enforced better is because if we get into this, if people don't stop at the watercraft inspection stations, they need to be, if we inspect them and they haven't stopped at a watercraft inspection station for whatever reason, and they get to our lake, really, we have no authority to turn them away. We are making a strong suggestion, and we plead with them not to launch their boat. And we haven't had a problem in all of the 3 years that we've been doing this, but you could have someone who is very upset and he decides to go ahead and launch into your lake. And then, we don't have any teeth, and all we've got is the RCMP to do something for us. Eventually, hopefully, we'll be able to do more. And if that's the case, we might have the ability to issue something so that they have to go get decontaminated. That's the hope, anyway.
One of our participants tonight say that they regularly have seen vehicles pulling boats on trailers drive by heading the inspection station when it's manned by AIS staff and when it's not. Should the police not be stopping people are stopping at those stations or having people stop at those stations somehow?
Absolutely. And I've heard that in Swan River, the natural resource individual will chase them down occasionally. It doesn't necessarily have to be the RCMP, but the RCMP are the best ones to do it. Unfortunately, either they're not well trained on this and feel uncomfortable to do it, or they don't feel it's one of the things they ought to be doing because their role is life and property. Now, you can argue that an invaded lake is property, and that could be pretty serious. But they should be stopped and, if necessary, fined.
So that was another question, I guess, too, or part of this question as well. Then, would it benefit to have some roadside check stops, particularly on long weekends, and it could be viewed as an awareness, educational experience as well as issuing tickets where necessary?
I think that's a great idea, and we could provide them with literature that's made for, it's in plain language, and it would be a good thing. We have suggested that, but I mean, we're trying to get our municipality to suggest that to the RCMP officers that patrol our municipality, and hopefully they'll try to do that this coming season.
Do conservation officers serve the Sandy Lake area?
Try and find one. They're in short supply, unfortunately.
What would be the nearest source?
I think there's one at Shoal Lake, if I'm not mistaken, but he's a pretty busy guy too. So
Can the RM bylaw officer enforce AIS laws, Daryl?
if it's a law that the municipality puts in place, I think they can. I'm not sure that they can enforce the province's AIS laws.
When you think of the Border Services Agency, what are some of the things in your mind that they might consider that would help abate this issue?
Well, Canadian Border Services has been given a pretty bad report. They're failing in their duties as far as trying to make sure that aquatic invasive species are not imported into Canada. And I know that our provincial AIS group, the province's 4 people, one of them has been dealing with DBSA. Truth be told, I don't think it's been very effective. I think they have tried. I think that an approach like having these individuals at the border put a lock on their boat, in other words, a zip tie, or something to attach the boat to the trailer, and if they can't get it off unless they go to a watercraft inspection station, I think that would make their life a lot easier. I suspect that they don't really want to be going around doing a full inspection on a watercraft that's coming in from the U.S.
I think that's all of the questions, Daryl. I'm wondering if you might have a parting shot that you might like to make in terms of what some of the gaps or greatest needs are as we move forward with this.
Well, I think that we need to somehow work to get the province of Manitoba to understand the value of our waters and change their mind about how much of a budget that they give to their AIS program. I think that's the biggest thing. I'm not sure exactly how to do that. The methods that we've been using don't seem to be working. So maybe it's more of a policy thing. Maybe we have to convince them that this is highly valuable, like the sports fishing industry in our area. They do studies on it, and I can't remember what the amounts they value it at, but it's a very large sum of money. And when people spend money in our area on this tourist activity, the province benefits because they get some tax dollars out of it. And a lot of the people that are in our area also benefit. Now in the north, it's probably even bigger. There's a lot of people that go up north and they fish and hunt, and that industry is significant. So maybe we have to change our strategy. Instead of asking for decontamination stations in certain spots, maybe it's better to not ask for something specific, but go after things at a policy level. And that's it.
Yeah, I just there's one comment here which I think is a good one. Comment is that staffing positions have been cut within the resource offices, and that again speaks then to the need for us to advocate with government.
Yeah, I know that I've talked to some people in government who have managed to stay in their positions, but when you ask them what their department was like, say 10 years ago, it was considerably larger. Their budgets were certainly a lot more healthy, and they were doing a lot more. And over the years, it's not just this government, but over the years, they've basically taken a lot of stuff away. It's probably not the only area the government has concentrated on, but certainly they have suffered considerably.
Thank you very much, Daryl, for another excellent presentation. All your presentations have been very informative, and we thank you for sharing your extensive knowledge. And thank you, Dennis, for assisting with the slides and the Q&As. Our next workshop is on January 13th at 7 p.m. and is entitled Ask the Biologist, an open Q&A session on prairie lakes with Bruno. In this session of our Lake Stewardship Workshop, retired biologist Bruno Brudelin, who has had decades of experience working on prairie lakes, will answer any questions you have about our lakes. And we thank you, Bruno, and we'll see you next week. Our next Manitoba Healthy Prairie Lakes Network planning meeting will be on January the 13th at 8:10 p.m. After Bruno's presentation. And the key items on the agenda here include planning further lake stewardship workshops, and also another area of interest has come up to have a discussion on forming a new inclusive provincial organization to protect all of our lakes and waterways for future generations. The suggested name for the organization is the Manitoba Lake Stewardship Association. So I'll leave you with that thought. And good evening, everyone. And thank you all for joining us. All the best to you and your families in 2021. Take care.